Ave, true to Christ. Hey everybody, this is Charitable Christianity, and today we are going to be doing a commenter video where I had a commenter talk about Charlie Kirk and different misunderstandings on Charlie Kirk. And I thought it'd be interesting to make a response to what they're saying, because I think that they have the wrong idea. The door is still open to you, by the way. If you want to come onto the channel and do an interview, I would love to talk to you and pick your brain and understand your worldview and maybe debate you as well. Interview or debate, whatever you want to do, I'm down for. But I'd love to make content with you and collaborate. It was an interesting conversation that we had, but we'll get right into it. All right. So we had monolithic monolithic chassis 7477 saying, you want to defend his stance on civil rights or act being a mistake or any other racist stuff he said. And already, off the top, they're going a little bit hot. I need more evidence on what was said before I can actually make a statement definitively, or any of the other racist stuff they said. And I just want to make it clear that I'm going to read the conversation first, and then I'm going to get into the evidence here of different comments that were made. So, I told them you're free to join the Discord and description. We can talk about it, or feel free to request reactions to certain videos. And I just pointed out that there's a lot of misinformation on Charlie Kirk, so I need a quote and a source before I can engage with whatever argument you're bringing. So they were talking about the Snopes attribution, which I'll have up there at the top. They couldn't find the clip. And then there's the 1350 argument, which is 13% of the population of black people commit 50% of crime in America. And that one's going to be a little bit nuanced, but we'll get to that in a moment. And so I let them know what's going on. And so they say the quote is, I have a very, very radical view on this, but I can defend it. And though I thought about it, Kirk said at America Fest, we have a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in 1960s. This guy shouldn't have been shot, but he shouldn't go lionizing and propping up someone who spreads hateful ideas, acting like he was some moral authority. With the quote I'll get to in a moment, but with this line specifically, that we shouldn't go lionizing and propping up someone who spreads hateful ideas and acting like he was some moral authority, I would ask, who is we in that case, and how are we doing that? Because if you feel that discussing it is akin to us propping up the belief structure, then how are we supposed to go around actually talking about the ideas? And when a tragedy like this happens, where somebody actually gets shot and political violence happens, how do we handle that in that case? I don't think that Charlie Kirk was a moral authority, and I don't understand that worldview. And this is why I wanted to interview you, because I wanted to understand your worldview and kind of understand where you're coming from. It doesn't matter to me if you're just some normal person. I think your views are interesting, and I would like to understand you better. And so I write here, define hateful ideas and why they shouldn't be propagated. Then tell me how Charlie Kirk falls into your definition of hateful. And this is why it's important that we got to understand terms, and we can understand where our understandings are between each other. And then I say also, how are we, who is we, holding up Charlie Kirk as a moral authority? And they say, you know what, fair point, egg on my face for assuming that you were a fan of his. And just so we're clear, I am a fan of his. My politics are going to be right-leaning, conservative, but I identify as a Christocrat. I don't identify as a Republican or a Democrat. I'm an independent. I only do things that are going to propagate the kingdom of God. That's what I vote for. And then they said, I was trying to type out a whole paragraph of stuff, but I lost it finding a video, so I'll be brief. Hateful ideas are knowingly misrepresenting the reality to harm a person, group, or entity. This refers more to the 1352 thing he said on Jubilee. Knowingly misrepresenting reality, though, is the to harm a person, group, or entity. So knowingly misrepresenting reality and then trying to harm, doing it with the intention of harming other people. So there's a categorical error that you're having here in assuming intent on Charlie Kirk's point, and you might have you might actually have you might be misrepresenting reality of Charlie Kirk without even realizing it. This is an example because the idea goes black people make up 13% of the population but make up 52% of the murder arrests. While this information is true on its face, it doesn't go any deeper and is misinformation that I fell for in the past. The reality is that black people also make up a large percentage of the murder acquittals, meaning they're the most wrongfully arrested for murder, indicating the issue is not that black people are disproportionately violent, but more often wrongfully accused of murder. I can find the exact stat if you insist, but I think it illustrates my point well enough, and I think spreading misinformation or harmful ideas that feed into people's racism is a bad thing to do. And to use your same worldview that you have here, if you're not going to actually post the actual statistic or tell me where to find it, I have no reason to believe that it's actually true. If you believe that they make up a large percentage of murder acquittals, let me look up definition of acquittal. Yeah, where would you get the stats that they were acquitted? It was an acquittal that they were wrongly they were wrongly accused. Because it is definitely possible that, and I remember in my psychology class, and this is a study that I've tried to find, but I haven't been able to find since I took that class in college, but there was the study that my teacher was showing me and referenced with a link. It was years ago, so I don't have that anymore. But basically, it was that if you have a white man with a hammer in their hand and a black man and a hammer in their hand, students showed in the study that they were going to see the black man as more threatening. So while you're right, there is a chance that there could be acquittals going on and whatnot. You can't then say a study that you didn't post and try to extrapolate that because there's more acquittals that they're therefore always wrongfully arrested. There's a jumping of the shark that you're doing here. And then we ended the conversation here. I told him that I'm a fan, but I'm not a sycophant. And that I've seen the statistics from the FBI, but I don't understand how it's misleading. With black people being wrongfully detained and you accused, you'll have to back that up with evidence and demonstrate how it's pervasive in society, and therefore extrapolating that these numbers come from black people being arrested at higher rates for assumed crimes they're not committing. If you're going to critique Charlie's worldview, what makes racism bad? And then they continued on saying, are you genuinely asking me to explain why making unfounded assumptions about people because their race is wrong and bad? And this is one of those things where if you are a person that is not hateful, if you're a person that is against racism, to you, like, you're completely against it, and from every fiber of your being, you do not like discrimination. For you, it's probably going to be ridiculous for me to ask you why it's bad. But the reason I ask is because I need to understand, do you and I have the same understanding of why racism is bad? If you give me the example, for example, I said that twice, run-on sentence. If you give me the example that racism is bad because it's evil, okay, but why is it evil? Because treating people terribly is denying people of dignity in the Catholic sense. the Catholic understanding of it. To deny dignity of people, that would be wrong, and that's what makes it evil. Okay, well, now I have a logic here of I understand your worldview. But if you try to tell me that, well, racism is bad, why should I have to tell you racism is an evil action? Okay, but why? Because to do it is wrong. Okay, now we're doing circular definitions where it's like, okay, I get it that you think it's wrong, but what actually makes it wrong? And it's important that we discuss that. We have quoting from the website Death Penalty Info Organization citing race and wrongful convictions in the United States 2022. The category of 1,167 wrongful murder convictions in the registry's database, African Americans constituted 56%, which is 74 over 134 of all death sentences, exonerees, 55% or 294 over 535 of wrongful murder convictions resulting in life imprisonment, and 54%, 270 over 497 of wrongful murder convictions in which exonerees were sentenced to imprisonment in terms of years. Quote, innocent black people are about 7.5 times more likely to be convicted of murder than innocent white people. The registry reported. That figure, the report notified, applies equally to those who are sentenced to death and those who are not. So let me find that real quick. I'm going to add that to the list. All right, I found it. I'll get to it later, though. And then they said third time trying to post the statistic. It's easy to find it by searching black acquittal for murder rate. But it's 54% for murder, which is 7.5 times more than white people. And I told them for why I'm asking about why racism is bad, it's so we can have an honest conversation. We need to define terms. And I let them know that I'll get the video done and urge them, that I could interview them if they were down, because I'd be down for it. All right, so now we're going to get to understanding things. So I'm actually going to be debunking some claims. So we're going to be using Snopes, which Snopes has a left-leaning bias, and they are not the most reputable source. But I want to use them because I think that using somebody who isn't as reputable that might have a political bias against Charlie Kirk is probably the better way to go in understanding this, because I also have a bias towards Kirk, and I'm more of a fan than Megan or Snopes writers are probably going to be. So we have the Silver Axe right was a huge mistake, which I have a video that we will get to in a moment. But correct attribution. So we verified the quote, and this was the quote that the commenter was talking about was the correct quote. These are the things that people usually have a problem with, that he said it was a huge mistake to pass the Civil Rights Act in 1964. But you notice when people say this, they don't put the context in here of like, what did he mean by it? What makes it a huge mistake? They just take their own imagined evilness of Charlie Kirk. Blaming Jewish money for ruining American culture, again, doesn't show the context here. He said gay people are destructive and endorsed having them put to death. Doesn't show the context. He said the Second Amendment is worth the cost of some gun deaths, which misses the context of this as well. So it's important that we understand that the narratives that we get fed to us by people, we have to be able to break them down. So this was the quote. He was responding to a question from a student. It was under the subject of a Title IX investigation at their university after posting a derogatory message about transgender people on social media. calling Martin Luther King Jr. awful. And then they don't actually answer it, which is, thank you, Snopes. Much reporting, much wow. So here's Charlie Kirk talking about it.
The Civil Rights Act was a new founding where we decided to discard the U.S. Constitution and reconstitute the story, the mantra, the creed, and the vision of America. And you even see this in Republican circles as well. Well, they say, well, the Civil Rights Act corrected a lot of the errors of the Constitution. No, it didn't. The Civil Rights Act was a completely new creation. Of course, it was well intended by some. We have acknowledged that many times. But the Civil Rights Act at its core was a new founding. It was the discard what happened prior. The Constitution says people have equal rights. Imagine just treating people equally. The Civil Rights Act does not treat people equally because the legal theory under the Civil Rights Act is disparate impact. And so therefore you can't arrest a bunch of criminals in D.C. because you might be disproportionately arresting black men, and that might be deemed as racist.
And so what you got to understand with that is that if we're talking about civil rights, we're talking about not a merit-based system where it's like, well, if you step out of line, if you commit crime, if you do all these other things that are going to get you in trouble, well, now we are going to correct you, and we're going to arrest you because you've committed a crime. It's now, well, if we have to be careful, because if we're arresting the wrong Asian man or wrong black woman or wrong Pacific Islander person, this, that, or the other thing, now what we're going to be doing is we're creating quotas. We're creating racial profiling, whether we realize it or not. And now to help a certain group and make sure that we aren't discriminating against certain groups, it's going to come at the cost of some things. Some things are going to be seen as racist when they aren't. Some things are going to be projected as, this was the intent of this group or this precinct of police, that they are clearly racially profiling. And if you look at conversations between people that are really focused on race and people that don't care about race, you'll notice that people who act like virtue signalers and want to call people out for not using the proper terms for certain groups and police language, they are so focused on race and how we're affecting other people that they basically crash out about everything. But a person who doesn't really care about race, doesn't care about what other races are doing, is going to be able to interact with other people no problem. And maybe they have a prejudice, or maybe they have a racist view on certain groups, but that could come from ignorance, So we just debunked that. That's not actually, the full context. If we try to do like the gun death one, because even though this isn't what the commenter was talking about, I think it's important to get into this. We have the gun death quote, and one of the things is this isn't the full quote. So they've already screwed up on this one. This isn't the full quote, because what Charlie was talking about was that we have to realize that if there are millions of guns in this country, we're not going to be able to eliminate gun deaths. So let me get the video for you so you can see what he said. So this is going to be the full context of the gun death quote.
Happened recently, and a lot of people are upset. But I'm seeing people argue for the other side that they want to take our Second Amendment or rights away. How do we convince them that it's important to have the right to defend ourselves and all that good stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So I'm a big Second Amendment fan, but I think most politicians are cowards when it comes to defending why we have a Second Amendment. This is why I would not be a good politician. Or maybe I would, I don't know. But because I actually speak my mind. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. I love hunting. The Second Amendment is not even about personal defense. That is important. The Second Amendment is there, God forbid, so that you can defend yourself against a tyrannical government.
Come on.
And if that talk scares you, wow, that's radical, Charlie. I don't know about that. Well, then you have not really read any of the literature of our founding fathers. Number two, you've not read any 20th century history. You're just living in Narnia. By the way, if you're actually living in Narnia, you would be wiser than wherever you're living, because C.S. Lewis was really smart. So I don't know what alternative universe you're living in. You just don't want to face reality that governments tend to get tyrannical, and that if people need an ability to protect themselves and their communities and their families. Now, we must also be real. We must be honest with the population. Having an armed citizenry comes with a price. And that is part of liberty. Driving comes with a price. 50,000 people die on the road every year. That's a price. You get rid of driving, you'd have 50,000 less auto fatalities. But we have decided that the benefit of driving, speed, accessibility, mobility, having products, services, is worth the cost of 50,000 people dying on the road. Wow. So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen. Right. You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home, yes, by having more armed guards in front of schools. Yes. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe. Sure. So then how do you reduce? Very simple. People say, oh, Charlie, how do you stop school shootings? I don't know. How did we stop shootings at baseball games? Because we have armed guards outside of baseball games. That's why. How do we stop all the shootings at airports? We have armed guards outside of airports. How do we stop all the shootings at banks? We have armed guards outside of banks. How do we stop all the shootings at gun shows? Notice there's not a lot of mass shootings at gun shows.
So what you notice with this quote is that what Charlie Kirk is talking about here is that not gun deaths are acceptable. Is that you're going to have to, what you got to accept is that if there is a reality where we have a tyrannical government and we need to have guns to protect ourselves from that tyrannical government, and you have a large amount of Americans that are armed with guns, then you're going to have to accept that there are going to be gun deaths. There's going to be situations with so many people having guns where bad actors are going to get access to guns that they shouldn't have. Mentally ill people are going to try and use guns for terrible situations. And there is going to be a cost for that freedom. And so that is why it's not acceptable that there's gun death because it's a good thing. It's acceptable because that is the trade-off you have to have for freedom. So, that's a misunderstanding as well. And then if we go to the empathy was made up, is a made-up New Age term. So this is another situation where correct attribution, that's, it's not a fully correct attribution. They actually have the video in here, but Charlie Kirk, online users shared a quote allegedly originating from the conservative political pundit on the subject of empathy. According to the users, Kirk once said, "I can't stand the word empathy. Actually, I think empathy is a made-up New Age term, and that it does a lot of damage." So this is the short clip, but this is the long clip, and so this is basically the only one I found as well.
So there's some really good polling out of Alaska that shows that Kelly Shabaka is gaining on Lisa Murkowski and is in a very, very good position despite the unconstitutional, immoral, incredibly complicated rank choice voting system. Never should have been approved. It's silly. It's backwards. It's rigged. It's awful. So the new communication strategy for Democrats, now that their polling advantage is collapsing in every single state. It's collapsing in Ohio. It's collapsing even in Arizona. It is now a race where Blake Masters is in striking distance. Kerry Lake is doing very, very well. The new communication strategy is not to do what Bill Clinton used to do, where he would say, "I feel your pain." Instead, it is to say, you're actually not in pain. So let's just very short clip. Bill Clinton in the 1990s, it was all about empathy and sympathy. I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage, but it is very effective when it comes to politics. Sympathy I prefer more than empathy. That's a separate topic for a different time. Here's cut 65.
So with this clip, and this is the issue that people have. The context here is that he's talking about what it used to be is during the time of Bill Clinton, we would talk about how I feel for you. So there's a sympathy that I have for you. And what he's talking about is that empathy is now a made-up New Age term that people use. That, like, how do you not have empathy for what's going on in Gaza, or what's going on with Palestine, or what's going on with Ukraine or Russia or wherever else where there's a tragedy happening? And what he is talking about is that people will weaponize that empathy that people are supposed to have for certain groups and then end up using it as ammunition in any conversation or debate or whatnot. Whereas he prefers sympathy, where we don't just show, and let me tell you the definitions between empathy and sympathy, just so we have a clear working definition. Sympathy definition. And this is the feeling of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. Empathy definition. The ability to understand and share feelings of one another. And both of them are really important because, one, you're understanding the other person and you're understanding the feelings that come with that. And sympathy, you are showing a sense of care, or you're showing a sense of, and how do they word it again? Sympathy definition. You're showing a pity or sorrow for what the person is going through. So there's different actions that are going on here. But the weaponization of empathy that I'm talking about is, oh, you don't feel this way for this person? You must be a monster. And that's where that New Age term comes in. And it does a lot of damage. But sympathy, I'm so sorry that happened to you. It's terrible to hear that's happened. You might have the empathy to connect with them and understand that what they're going through is terrible. But to show them the sympathy, that your sympathies are with them, is a completely different thing. So that's a nothing burger as well. I don't even know why people would use that against Charlie Kirk. You might have the George Floyd is a scumbag, and I don't even need to show you what Snopes wrote for this one, because the reason that Charlie Kirk believed that George Floyd was a scumbag was the fact that he was dealing drugs, allegedly, that he had beaten women, allegedly, and the way he handled the situation where he was, if I remember right, he was strung out or something like that, when he had the whole altercation that he had with the cops, and was attacking them. And then it got to the point where they could not stop him until they fully submitted him. And when he was talking about it, he couldn't breathe. He ended up dying of a overdose of, I can't remember what it was. But it was just a really tragic situation. I disagree with Charlie on this. I don't think that we need to be calling people scumbags, and I don't think that it's necessary or helpful to be calling names on people like that and passing that kind of judgment on somebody. That's something that God needs to figure out. That's not our place to figure out. And so this one, I could definitely see why people have issues with it. Now we'll go to the FBI stats. So the most recent FBI stats that we have is 2019. It doesn't go any further. But you can see for the crime stats, we have the total of races, and in 2019, 69% were perpetrated by white people. We have 26% being perpetrated by black or African American people. If we look at the murder rates, though, this is where the 50% number comes from. We can see that they perform more murders than white people. Now, if we go with the logic that the commenter was talking about and we look at these numbers, for the black community, we're looking at robbery, murder, what else? What other ones are going on that are pretty? So it looks like those are the highest ones that we're seeing. If we look at white people, it looks like rape, burglary, larceny or theft, motor vehicle theft, arson, property crime, other assaults in general, forgery, fraud, embezzlement. So you see that across the board, white people are doing a majority of crime. So if we want to be honest in this conversation, white people are the biggest problem out of all the races. There's a huge issue with white people that we're seeing here. But what we do have to realize is that with this consistent crime that we're seeing with white people, where white people are very criminally minded, why is it that black people outdo white people when it comes to murder and manslaughter and robbery? That's an interesting thing that we need to take into effect. And you can see the Latino and Hispanic percentages, which are pretty low. Now, the reason this number is so significant is if black people are about 13% of the population and they are committing more than the majority, that's alarming. Same thing with the robbery. And so what is causing that behavior? That's the conversation route that Charlie Kirk is trying to take with the Jubilee discussion. And I couldn't find the Jubilee, what was being said in the Jubilee discussion. Now, if we go to 1991, or 1995, I mean, which is the first time that the FBI decided to look up the crime stats, we can see that it was 64% and for white people and 33% for black people. If we look at the numbers before, 69 for white people, 26 for black people. So if we look at the distribution there from 1995 to 2019, we see a 5% increase in crime from white people overall, and we have seen a decrease in crime from black people. Now, even if we look at the same thing as before, where we look at the murder and the robbery, it was still pretty high. But you can see that it's actually gone down by 9% to 8%, somewhere around there. So they're actually improving. But the concern that we have here is that's still pretty high. And again, if it's so high with what's going on and they're outperforming the majority, which if we see here, you can still see that white people are still outperforming black people when it comes to crime. And that was the city arrests. Distribution by race. We're still seeing overwhelmingly white people are committing more of the crimes than anything else. But it is completely legitimate to bring up the fact that why is this happening? And I don't think it's racist to talk about that. Also, from population-wise, we're seeing that white people are going down, but they're the biggest makeup of races in America, and they are committing just about per capita to their or maybe not per capita, but just about what our percentage of the population is. We're basically making up that percentage of crimes in most crimes, which is normal, right? We're committing the same amount of crime percentage-wise as the race makeup that we have in the country. So when black people, who only make up about 12 to 13% of the country, as you can see in the graph here with the yellow line, and they are committing more than 3 times the amount of murders that they should be capable of compared to other races that they are, and with robbery as well, that they are outperforming white people. That's a concern. Now you could say that black people are wrongfully convicted, and we'll get to that study that you brought up, commenter, in a moment. But if that's the case, why is it so consistent across the board for white people that they are performing or overperforming in some areas on crime, and it's just murder and robbery that black people are outperforming so heavily in those areas? So it would be reasonable to bring up those concerns. Now, this is the study that the commenter was talking about, and I'm going to pause and read through it real quick and give you guys a summary of what I'm seeing. I'll also have it linked down in the description below, but I will come back after I get done reading. So I just got done skimming through and checking this out. See if I can move myself real quick. One moment. There we go, much better. So this is in conclusion. I read most of this. I skimmed through a lot of it, but it seemed a little weird. There was this idea that with the statistics that they were showing in the exoneree when it came to the murder statistics, there was a huge uptick at one point, and then it just went down. And I might be able to find it real quick. So that was on we were just on page 52. I just want to see it again because it was kind of odd. It didn't line up with what they were talking about. So you see that about 1992 we had an sharp uptake in the murder exonerations, and then it's gone steadily down. We see that 1980 is the baseline that they're running with, and now black people are about back to where we were in 1980, so it's gone down quite a bit. That's consistent with the fact that we've seen the murder rates from 1995, which is the first year, which is also the highest year. They were at 60%, and then they went down to 51% in 2025. So with the trend that we're seeing, they should be at least back to normal. So if we go back to page 52, where we were at, conclusion, exonerations provide a view of criminal cases from the past that we couldn't see when they happen. For murder, we see a high concentration of innocent black defendants who were convicted in the 1980s and 1990s. The scale of that problem seems to have decreased for convictions in the past 20 years, along with the sharp drop in the national murder rate after 1995, but it's hardly gone away. We know that about many of those 20 to 40-year-olds false murder convictions because of the work of a handful of big city persecutorial conviction integrity units. We can only hope that their offices and other prosecutors and police will learn from the past they have uncovered and avoid similar injustices in the future. Rape won't be and drugs won't be necessary for this conversation because we're focusing on murder. The causes of this extreme racial discrepancy are plain. Black people are much more likely than white people to be stopped and searched by officers who are trolling for drugs, which puts them at the risk of false. And this is the issue I'm having with this, that the conclusions that they're drawing from this, and even when I was reading the study, they're pulling a bunch of numbers from what they're seeing in the averages, but they're not fully extrapolating the numbers that they're saying. And the fact that we have such a sharp decrease happening of exonerations means that they should at least be telling us that we're treating black people better overall. Yet we're still seeing 51%, just a 9% in decrease from 1995 of murder rates, which is where we saw the highest rates. So that there's a little bit of an indiscrepancy with those numbers, but something that I am willing to take into account is that black people are more wrongfully convicted because you see 3 times the amount of convictions. The fact that they only make up 12% of the population, but they're getting charged for 3 times the amount of crimes that they could be committing. So there is definitely a possibility that there is a lot of acquittals happening based on that. That would be a fair extrapolation. I'd be fine in accepting that. But that still doesn't get to the conversation that Charlie Kirk was making about the murder conversation. The fact that if consistently they're doing 3%, 3 times as much more, but when it comes to murder, they're doing almost what? If they have 12%, 12, 24, 36, 48, they're almost doing 5 times the amount of murder of anybody else. 5 times the amount of murder what their population represents, which they're committing half the crime of murder and robbery in the country. It's not good. And that still stands on Charlie Kirk's point, because his point on bringing that up is that fatherlessness homes, marriage out of wedlock, just a lot of evil being thrust upon the black community leads to these terrible outcomes that we're seeing. So just the main thing to take away from this is that, listen, feel whatever way you want about Charlie Kirk, but don't call him a racist, because all these things that you're seeing, it's not a racist man that we're talking about. It's just somebody who is a human being, man. If you have an issue with any of the quotes, like, we can talk about it. And again, I'd still like to open the door to a conversation with you. Let's see your name again. Monolith Cashies 7477. I still would like to interview you and understand your worldview and why you feel the way you do. But other than that, that is everything, guys. Hopefully I've at least debunked some of the claims against Charlie Kirk, and hopefully that helps in this conversation. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you guys all have a blessed day, and bye-bye.